solution to our unemployment or unemployability issue, they haven't done the math. India became the largest producer of milk in the world. Last year we produced 100 million tons of milk, but there were 75 million people involved in that. The US produces 60 million tons of milk with 100,000 people.
So it's low productivity.
These 75 million people are not employed. We're condemning them to poverty.
We used to study about disguised unemployment.
Yes, these guys are hanging out. Yeah. So we need to move them to ideal would be to move them to non-farm rural jobs. But in absence of that, we've got job creation happens in clusters. Urban areas are centers of productivity. So we have to move people from their 70% of our population, which produces 20% of our GDP. There is a lopsided labor market that we have. Yeah. And even self-employment, you know, 50% of India's labor force is self-employed. This is not a badge of India's entrepreneurial abilities.
It's just that they don't have anything else to do, so that's what
it's our failure to create non-farm jobs and our failure to do skill development. You know, the poor cannot afford to be unemployed, so they are self-employed. It is most of self-employment is forced self-employment.
So what do you think is the way forward? I mean, yes, we know there are problems with education, and if we look at the short run, that really can't be some, I mean, yeah, sure, it should be ideally, but in the short run, skill development and education reforms are not going to be easy. What are the things that the government can do in the short run first? We'll come back to the long run.
Let me step back. See, I think the biggest lesson of 18 years of reform is that growth is a necessary but not sufficient condition for poverty reduction. Poverty reduction needs access. Access, to my mind, comes from the 3 E's: education, employability, and employment. If we accept that in the short run we can fix the employment regime, in the medium term we could fix the employability or skill regime, and in the long run we could fix the education regime. There is a huge, in the employment itself in the short run, there's a huge matching problem. You know, we have 1,200 employment exchanges in this country. Last year, to the 4 crore people registered, they gave 2 lakh jobs.
Are they even functional?
No, they spend a lot of money. But
I know that when we look at data, we say that, oh, don't look at employment exchange data because that doesn't really tell you anything.
That is the problem. We had a job mela in Jaipur where 35,000 people showed up in one day.
What's a job mela?
Where we took 100 employers to Jaipur and we advertised saying kids come over, and 35,000 kids came over. I was the only guy wearing a suit for like 10 miles.
These are kids with having
across
passed school, college?
8th class, 10th class. We invited everybody and we separated by qualification. But I was the only guy wearing a suit for like 10 kilometers. So 1,000 kids came up to me. And I can guarantee you that 800 of those kids, if they were born in Delhi, Bombay or Bangalore, they would have had a job. It's what I call the ovarian lottery, right? They were born in Dausa or Barmer or Ajmer, where they had the right attitude, they had the skills, but they just couldn't match themselves with the job. And we shipped 2,000 of those kids to Delhi that day. So there's a matching problem which needs to be addressed, where
the employment exchanges are not doing that
solving. So we need to either revamp them and convert them to career centers, we need to do public-private partnerships, we need to set up call centers, we need to have websites. So matching is low-hanging fruit.
Okay. We'll come back to this later. We're going to talk about longer term issues and what are the difficulties with labor laws in India, what sort of labor reforms are needed, but that's after the break. Keep watching. In the next 5 years, 25% of the world's new workers will be in India. 10 to 15 million people will join the workforce every year. How are these people going to be absorbed in the labor market? How can we increase their employability, their skill level? How can labor laws be changed so that they can get employment and productive employment at that? I have with me Manish Sabharwal. Welcome back, Manish. Manish, you were saying that we should be focusing more on how to solve the mismatching problem. Yeah. Now, going beyond that, going beyond the short term, in terms of the labor laws that exist, you know, we've seen the last more than 5 years actually, not just the UPA, but even the NDA had started with saying that labor laws will be changed. But then, you know, after a couple of budgets, I remember that Yashwant Sinha had dropped changing labor laws from budget speeches. So we don't really see political support, at least among political parties who have unions, to change labor laws. Yet from everything that you and I have studied, we understand that this is something that's important. Now, you are seeing this at the ground level. And so why don't you, I'd like you to describe to me some of the problems which exist because of labor laws and how they need to be changed.
Oh, to my mind, the labor laws of this country are the ultimate minority role. The 7%.
It's just the unions.
7% of our labor force is unionized. They have managed to position job preservation as a form of job creation. And there are huge unintended consequences of this regime. We encourage companies to substitute labor with capital. I had office boys who were serving tea in a multinational. The union said make them permanent. The company threw them out and got coffee machines. I can give you thousands of examples where companies spend money to buy machines rather than capital. There's a lot of corruption, because even a central labor commissioner recently told them we are trying to enforce the unenforceable. So obviously there's too much subjectivity
in terms of
the labor law regime. It is impossible to comply with the labor laws of this country without 100% of them without breaking 20% of them.
If you can be more specific, in what terms, for example?
Oh, I can give you thousands of anecdotal evidence. In Delhi, there's one law which says you can't pay workers with cash, and one law which says you have to pay them in cash. So which one do we follow? We can decide. We can figure it out. The most important consequence, and that's where I agree with what your statement about Chidambaram said, that we did not have jobless growth. Labor laws make sure that all job growth happens in the unorganized sector. 93% of India's labor force works in the unorganized sector. Nobody likes the unorganized sector. Employers don't like it because it's lower productivity. Policymakers
but why don't employers like it? They can hire and fire, and they have full flexibility. Why would they prefer an organized
because employers in India actually have made peace with labor laws because of the transmission losses between how the law is written, interpreted, practiced, and enforced.
So they found loopholes and they found ways around it.
It's a thorn in the flesh. It's no longer a dagger in the heart. It's not the binding constraint, which is why the myth that corporate India will gain from labor reform is perpetuated by left parties in self-interest.
So they would prefer organized but not unionized labor?
Yeah, well,